So for interpretations 1 and 2, the idea of afterlife and the idea of scientifically finding a way to cause us to live possibly forever. And we're kind of repeating some of the themes that were presented in Generations. Though last time I rewatched Generations, I did realize you can actually watch the whole film from a pro-afterlife perspective, and it remains a coherent film. And I wonder if that was done intentionally. Because normally I've seen Generations as being kind of chipping away at the idea of an afterlife as something that's positive. Last time I watched it, I started to think maybe it's not. Maybe it's more what I listed as category 2. Then for category 3 on the topic of assisted suicide, so we might think of the DS9 season 4 episode, The Quickening, in which Bashir tries to cure an alien race from a deadly artificial disease engineered by the Dominion. And then Bashir meets their own doctor, Trevian, and he finds that this doctor's way of handling things is to medically administer a wonderful little poison to speed up their death. Bashir and Trevian come to blows about this practice, but then once Bashir finally actually finds a cure, Trevian ends up backing Bashir and doing everything he can to go and spread that cure as fast as possible. Or you might think about the Voyager episode Critical Care, in which these aliens who kidnap the doctor to get his medical help, they're all busy about using just absolutely egregious medical expenses to keep these privileged few people alive while allowing less privileged people to suffer and die. Or you might think of the brief scene in Star Trek V, the movie, in which McCoy experiences this haunting memory of when his dad was on the medical table and he ended up pulling the plug on his suffering father, only to find shortly later that there actually was a cure that could have been used to save him. I think even more relevant to the topic would be the Voyager episode Death Wish, in which the immortal Q named Quinn wanted to end the monotony of Q existence by killing himself, but the Continuum wouldn't allow it. So the topic of living forever, and then really fitting, I think, are the 2 Klingon assisted suicide stories. There's one in The Next Generation and one in Deep Space Nine, which I think is really fascinating to kind of put them side by side, how they're similar and how they're different. In the Next Generation episode, Worf had been paralyzed, probably for life, they thought. So he asked Riker to kill him as part of a Klingon ritual that would allow him to retain his honor and have an honorable death, killed ritually by his friend. And Riker was absolutely repulsed. And there was at one point in the episode where he arrogantly criticized Worf for his selfishness, if I remember it right. But then Picard meets up with Riker and encourages Riker to be more understanding and to realize the significance of this being a cultural difference and that kind of thing. And then in the DS9 episode, where Worf tries to kill his brother Kurn as part of the same ritual, Sisko basically calls him into his office and gives him a vicious scolding, insisting, he should have known better. This kind of behavior is unacceptable for a Starfleet officer. So as I was kind of musing on these 2 similar stories and how they fit in with the theme here, I started thinking about how it seems like we have 3 different perspectives about the moral nature, how the characters see the morality of this Klingon suicide ritual. We had Riker's perspective, Picard's perspective, and Sisko's perspective, which are all quite different. But then it occurred to me that, maybe that's not really the case at all. We don't have 3 perspectives. Maybe instead you're really seeing 3 different situations. Because Riker's situation was that he was asked to kill his friend with a horrid-looking, jagged ritual knife. His friend, who's laying in the hospital and has a young son and a lot of people who look up to him. Whereas Picard's situation was that he's watching one of his officers treating another officer in a condescending, judgmental, and disgusted attitude. And then Sisko's situation was that he just had one of his most trusted officers get caught trying to murder his own brother on board the space station, which he's in command of. He's trying to manage and, So probably, certainly probably some of these characters do have some slight variations in terms of their subjective feelings or their way of viewing the concept of Klingon ritual suicide, how to respond to it. But probably the biggest difference in their reactions is actually just the fact that they're each reacting to quite different interpersonal situations. One thing that's kind of interesting in light of Star Trek Picard is that the one who was the most open to Klingon ritual suicide was Picard. And in this situation that we're at now, Picard seems kind of unhesitant to do a very similar act toward Data. And then just on the topic of number 5, living as living and living as dying, it definitely leads me back to the beginning of Picard's story in the early episodes of the season, which I've talked about a number of times in this series of videos. My first thought on my first watch back in 2020 just as it began when Picard leaves